Today is an amazing day for Monograph magazine because we have with us an exemplary musician, the legendary Mr. Susmit Bose, who paved the way for English music in India through his debut album, Train to Calcutta in 1973, and it's been nearly 50 years. I'll start off with a generic question. Did you always want to be a musician, or was it something that crept up on you on one fateful day?
I decided I want to be a musician at the age of 4 or 5. But then, I come from a Indian classical music family. My father was, besides being the director in All India Radio, he was also very well known Thumri singer. And so we used to have a lot of, you name an Indian classical artist from Ali Akbar Khan Saab to Alauddin Khan Saab to whatever it is, everybody has been flitting around uh, in and out of the house. So, but what was it is that I wanted to grow up to be Pandit Sushman Bose, which never happened. Because those days, you see, music was not considered to be something that people from supposedly uh, good families should be taking. And therefore, father never sort of allowed that thing to happen. And it created a lot of rift with me and my dad. And we didn't see eye to eye. So he would throw me out of the house. I would leave the home, sleep in the station, sleep in public places till the cops would come, hit me out, throw me out. No money, nothing. And there was those days, the whole structure of a family structure was that these days young people are very empowered. We weren't. So everything had to come through dad. Baba had to say that, "Oh, this is okay to do." And we didn't have the wherewithal. I couldn't walk into somebody's house and say, "Hey, I want to learn guitar." Of course, I didn't know the music at all. And so that thing was not there. So so what happened was that, I was very frustrated as a young boy. Very, very frustrated. I didn't have I knew that I was not being able to learn what I wanted to. So all these greats who would come to my house, they would, every Wednesday or a Sunday, at home there'll be a boitok, and people will come. People like, somebody like Rasulin Bai or Hirabai Barodekar or Timir Boron or, Radhika Mohan Moitra, Nikhil Banerjee, Shambhu Maharaj, and all these people would come. And while the elders were doing this kind of shoiri, I would sit outside the door and kind of get my ear to the door crack and listen to how they would structure a phrase. How do I get when I sing? How do I get an emotion into lines? Those were the things. So I picked that up from there, and then of course I was in a school. This is a long answer.
Sure, sure, sure. That's completely fine.
Okay. So I was like any young person after independence was we all went to an English medium school. And my school, thankfully for me, was a very progressive one.
Springdale.
Springdale. It was a very progressive one. And my principal, who I owe my existence to, was, we used to have every year, we used to have a ballet. And every ballet had a kind of a social messaging. And she used to write the script, she used to do the music, she used to do everything. And they were with a lot of, she and her husband were in a lot of these civil rights movements in England. So they knew what was it. So one day in one of these ballets, there was this rehearsal going on, and there was a poem of Tagore being recited where the head is held high, where the mind is without fear, and the head is held high. And there was this girl, I can still see her, I mean, in a kind of flowing satin dress, put her hands up like this and was enacting the thing. And all of a sudden, by default, on the PA, there was a song called I Can See a new day soon to be, where the storm clouds are all past and the sun shines on a world that is free. My hair stood on end.
I have goosebumps right now.
So I went to the booth and I said, what was that? So my music teacher was much more of a mentor for me than my father. My father disregarded me. So he just threw an album at me because he was busy. And there was this album with a tall, lanky man with his head thrown back, with an instrument in hand, arc light, and one single microphone. And the album was called I Can See a New Day, Pete Seeger. My entire perspective of life changed. And I took I took to it. And so now there was another trauma there. How do I get into it?
Yes.
I said, this is what I want to do. So soon enough, of course, I mean, this whole idea of, slowly kind of it tapered down to my focus. I never listened to Western music earlier. I didn't know what it was.
Indian classical music.
It was just Indian classical for me. And of course, the radio blared out Bollywood songs, and some people sang some Cliff Richard songs and all that stuff, which I used to pick up. So through Pete Seeger, when I was kind of got so involved into it that I got to know of Paul Robeson, Bob Dylan, the whole Woody Guthrie structuring and everything. And I was a very timid, shy kind of a boy, I mean, not just like one of those very ambitious kind of a thing. So I struggled. I mean, that was a different kind of struggle as to fix myself into that, what I had just decided I want to do. Write my own songs, sing like Pete Seeger. While so my principal was very fond of me because I was an intense kind of sensitive boy. So I started visiting her home, and she and her husband spoke to me about students' movement, civil rights movement abroad. And slowly and gradually, it sort of soaked into me the whole idea of this kind of social change music. Of course, those days it was called protest songs, but which I never wanted to accept, which are bad terminology. And so through that, I got into it, and of course, I was dying to get into college, but college was just, I dropped out. But college was just kind of an escape thing for me. And so just to be free to be able to go anywhere I want, because I didn't have to take permission. Can I go here? Can I go there? And so I picked up the guitar from hippies or something like that, used to, a broken down guitar. And I didn't have any money to buy a guitar or anything, learn few chords. And in the university in the 60s, there were very dichotomous times. There was that Vietnam War. There was a man on the moon. There was Laila Khalid the first woman hijacking from Palestine, hijacking an aircraft. There was Marianne Faithfull with the sexuality. There was Nirvana. There was the hippies. There were a whole lot of things happening. And beginning mid 60s, it seemed that the world had all of a sudden changed and the youth had taken over. It was a milestone kind of year, it was kind. And so people were writing songs, people were writing Hard Rains Are Gonna Fall, Blowing in the Wind, Masters of War, and
Rainy Day
Women, and all that kind of stuff. And so the world changed, and everybody was making a statement. And those were the high peak times of the Nakshas.
Yes.
Where everyone in the university was a communist.
And the emergency was
emergency and everything. Well, everybody was a leftist. So everybody was making a statement. And I found that, young people, how are we going to kind of, come to a point where we can concretize our ideology? All that's fine, peace, love, no war, nothing. So since everybody was writing, expressing themselves through various kind of art forms. I wrote a song called Walking, Talking,
Walking.
Contradiction.
It was in Be the Change.
Yeah, that came later.
Yeah,
Be
yeah,
the
yeah.
Change came much later because I found there was so much of contradiction in young people, but there was this very hard kind of a thing of wanting to get into it, do something.
Be right is more than be right.
That's right. So there was this thing, and so finally, of course, I became a hippie, went into a different course, went into Kathmandu, smoked a lot of ganja, and sort of hung around, and and so that's how I got into this style of music.
There's a story of you in Kathmandu where you ran into a very famous
Jimmy
guitarist.
Page.
Yes. Would you like to share
Jimmy
that?
Page, I didn't even know it was Jimmy Page. There used to be the funny thing about the hippies was, although it was so progressive, but there was a woman and man. There was quite a gender kind of
Yeah.
a thing. There wasn't an equal thing. And so they used to, once there was a little pond and all the men got and bathed and everything and got off, and then the women came and then they took over. And so I had a battered guitar. And I went to Kathmandu with one of the guys who had organized Woodstock.
Oh wow.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Bearded guy, beautiful.
Of course.
So I'd gone there and no money, no money. So there was this little chai shop where everybody gathered. And I just picked up a guitar just to show to them that I could do something. And I started singing. So from that day on, my food and staying was taken care of. So every evening I would get back home. We used to stay in these small huts. The village used to, near Hanuman Doka, they used to rent out these little places for 10 rupees or 12 rupees. And every evening when I would get back, and there would be a little note stuck to my door saying, come here with your,
Guitar.
sing song, there's food. And I would go there and sing. And so one day, while all this thing was happening at the pond, I was sitting there and I was singing Stairway to Heaven. And so man comes, lanky guy, with his face down all the time, who came and sat down and he says, hey, there's a better way of doing that. And I said, I don't give a damn, I do it my way. So he took the guitar and he said, shit, guitar, man. So anyway, he played. And it was just beautiful what he sang. And I mean, I was just looking at him. Anyway, after that, he just left, nodded his head like this and left. And so when I went to where everybody was sitting, one person said, what was Jimmy saying to you? I said, who's Jimmy? He says, you don't know that was Jimmy Page. Gosh, I could have run.
Maybe that was the time he decided to write Kashmir after.
Possible. And I could have run after him, but he'd gone far. So anyway, that was my experience with Jimmy Page.
Coming back to the answer that you gave in your first question, do you think there's still a certain kind of stigma attached to college students or normal students wanting to pursue music?
No, not at all. Not at all. When we were young, there's a cliched kind of a adage, like they would say that elders would, if you were interested in musician and you were a musician, people would ask you, "Beta, tum karte kya ho?"
What's your day job?
Yeah, and you would say, "मैं गाना गाता हूँ," and he would say, "नहीं वो तो ठीक है, मगर काम क्या करते हो?"
It was only a hobby then. It was only a hobby.
And especially in these kind of hypocritical middle class families, where you were, the funny thing was, although we had just gained independence, the British were out, but we were being brought up by, sort of having to learn all the British etiquettes of sitting at the table, using a knife and fork. And so it was a very mixed kind of a time. It was a beautiful time.
You could say India was still trying to find its identity in the world.
India had found its identity, but was scared to let go of. I mean, because they wanted to put a foot in the world map. So they thought that, this was what would take them. So
Sort of romanticizing colonization.
yeah. So that's how it was.
I see. And other than that, Jimmy Page, obviously the guitarist of Led Zeppelin, and we know that you've been a fan of folk music for a long time, Bob Dylan, Pete Seeger, Guthrie. And other than that, you've played with jazz musicians, you've uh, released an album with the Bowls. But what are your takes on other genres of music? For example, Led Zeppelin, the progenitors of heavy metal, you could say. Do you have a concrete opinion on that genre?
To be very honest, uh, since the time I started writing my own stuff, I got so involved with it that every other music I stopped listening to. So while I was in the profession for 40 years, I never listened to music. It was just my music I was thinking about. And so, I mean, I curated an album called Rock for Life, which had all
Northeast
metal,
60s,
all
yes.
metal kind of stuff.
There's an amazing
Yes.
scene there.
Yes, so it was on AIDS and stuff. And so I'm used to that music, but I would not, I mean, like I went to my son took me to a very heavy rock concert. And so he says, Dad, please don't headbang. You do not you don't fit in. So I said, I don't have any hair to headbang, man. So anyway, so that was the kind of stuff that. So I was easy with classic rock. I was easy, and I saw the change. I only started liking Beatles from Revolver. Before that, Love Me Do, and P.S. I Love You, and all that. Put on your red shoes, baby. I want to take you out tonight.
When they started experimenting properly.
Yeah, wasn't my scene. My scene was
Taxman, Eleanor Rigby.
exactly. My scene was music there had to be a purpose for music. You could not just go and do a dance thing. Play an instrumental, that's fine.
I'm going to ask a sort of controversial opinion, and you may have your personal opinion on it. When Bob Dylan won the Nobel Prize for Literature, a lot of people claimed that Leonard Cohen should have won the award, but Bob Dylan won it because he was American. But they were very different people. Cohen was mostly obsessed with love and the idea of love, and Dylan was more of a, political guy, you could say. A song and dance man, definitely, but a more political guy. And a lot of people chalk down Dylan's love for Kolkata's love for Dylan, sorry, for because of the anti-US thing that was going on here in the 70s. Do you agree with that sort of view?
That's something that is now once again. I mean, a lot of people said, "Hey, it was given to the wrong Bob." I said, "What do you mean?" Said it should have gone to Bob Marley. So there were a lot of opinions like that. I mean, in the US, when Dylan got the Nobel Prize, a lot of young people didn't even know who Dylan was. I mean, so that was it. So there are opinions and opinions. Yeah, Cohen could have done one. Simon and Garfunkel could have got one if lyrics was the point. But I think what Dylan possibly achieved was that he changed the mindset of a whole generation.
The voice of a generation.
The voice, like the Beatles changed in that the imagery of psychedelia.
Or Nirvana later.
Or Nirvana, or the punk rockers changed it to the aggressive thing, like but it was bad. I mean, when it was like this spitting on stage and showing your anger,
Or
breaking your guitar, or the glam rock, dressed up, and all those kind of things. So music just changed to visual.
What about the current scene? Do you think it's still very visually oriented, or what is your opinion on the current sort of music that's going on?
I think it's more orchestrated now. Today's music is more orchestrated because more so it caters to a dancing kind of a group.
True.
There are, not to say that that's dead. Listening to music is not dead.
The indie music scene is
yes, it's there. It's there. But even with Indian classical music now, I mean, when a classical musician goes on stage today, he barely plays the alap for about 3 minutes or 4 minutes. Then he misses, then he leaves out all this jod and mat jod and all that, straight gets onto jhala. And in that jhala, he spends a lot of time with that Sawal Jawab, which Zakir Hussain
Call and answer,
started.
yes.
The tabla and
The call and answer.
yeah, that's right, the instrument. So I mean, many years ago, there was IIT Bombay Mood Indigo. There was a concert, and I was there, and I would name the Indian classical musician. So he was there. He was nervous as hell because he was billed after me. So he came and he says, Sushmit ji, ये गलत बात है. मेरे को कौन सुनेगा आपके बाद? I said, सब आपको ही सुनने आए. तो he says, मैं क्या करूं मैं? I said, you just go on stage. एक बार IIT में जो है, सारे बहुत खुश मिजाज के हैं. They are all stoned and all that. They just want to imagine a psychedelia.
They want to feel the music.
They want to feel the music, and so you just get there and you play a long alap. That was it. Anyway, when I went on, I said no, but that I won't do, because if I'm billed first, I accept it. I will do my bit, and I promise you, I will not do on go. I might have to do one, which is my PR kind of thing, and then I'll come back, and I did that. He went and he sat on the thing, and he started off. And I said, what is he doing? So people started booing, because it was so ruckus. And I mean, after some song, after my song, there was a purpose in that song. And I speak a lot, my performances are different. So I'm talking, I'm singing. And after that, somebody called, you've got an image of that man. He's going to take them to Stairway to Heaven or something like that. And you come and you just bum trip the whole thing that you're going through. So that's the point today. The lyrics have also changed now. The lyrics are very little. There's more of music. There are things like bar chord. I don't know what that bar chord means. No, power chord.
Power chord.
Sorry.
Power chords are basically just
That's it.
It's
It's
just the first and the fifth.
Yeah, it's just a kind of anyway.
A major chord without the
That's
major note.
right. That's right. So a lot of workshops that I do, and they come to me with the electric guitar and all that, and with all their phaser and all that. They do everything. So I said, okay, you've done your bit. Now here's my guitar. Remove all those phasers and please play what you did on this.
Without any effects. Doesn't sound like it.
So your music is actually kind of
dependent on these effects.
Absolutely. It's what is it called? The word I forget. When you're dependent on a mood elevator, what's the word?
I can't think of it.
Okay. So it's like that. It's something like that, So you're punching on keys, but the music is just anyway. But I'm not. I don't think. I mean, every age gets the art it deserves. So I am not anti it. I do listen to it. I have a lot of young people who discuss it with me, but it's not my thing.
Coming back to your time at Spring Games.
Yes.
Would you consider yourself a Delhi boy through and through?
Absolutely. If there was no Delhi, I wouldn't be there. Because, Delhi was being the capital, and there was so much of politics there that it was a breeding ground for me. I could participate directly, and not just in one kind of politics. It was across the border. So, yeah, it did help me.
When did you decide to shift to Calcutta, and why?
I decided to move to Calcutta because in Delhi, the creative space was all taken by the mainstream. There was no space for me. So I didn't want to be a part of that. and Delhi was becoming like a mall where everything was consumer oriented, and there was
It was a much more
not
commercial.
very commercial, not to my liking. So I decided to leave the place. But it took me a while. Took me a while to decide. I went around, wrecking around what kind of place would suit me. And I don't know why, I mean, everybody asks me, but why Calcutta? Because most of the people away from Calcutta said, Sushmita, why are you going to Cal? There's nothing there. So I said, there's something that I know there is, and that will take me there. And so, moving around, finally I came down to Calcutta. Calcutta has always been a passion city for me. I had nothing to do with this city. When I was young, we used to come, father used to bring us to Kolkata to meet my grandmother. And we used to stay in Central Avenue. So I used to walk from that Indian Airlines office from Chandni to Chaurangi to Park Street to Free School and all that kind of stuff and go back home.
To all the colonial buildings.
Yeah, and that was my kick. But in 71, I did try to make a move to Calcutta, but I was at an audition, and that time, just after Woodstock, I sang Ricky Haven's Freedom, you know. So the owner of that restaurant comes out after me and said, "We don't want any communists here."
Very McCarthy.
So I left. And then, once he heard of me and then he wanted to call me back, I said, "Sorry, babe, not my scene there."
It would have been the opposite of Calcutta at that time.
Yes. I'm sure Calcutta would have been great fun because I've always regarded Calcutta as a great place for music.
And did it ever influence your music, Calcutta as a city?
The Bowls did.
Bowls.
Yeah. The Bowls did greatly.
Coming back to your influences, Bob Dylan, Pete Seeger, who are some of your other influences?
There have been aspects in my music, and each aspect is a kind of an influence from one genre to the other. Like, for instance, as I told you about structuring a line to how to sing came absolutely from the Indian classical thing. I still rehearse. My rehearsals are based on an Indian classical system of the voice training. Dylan, Pete Seeger was completely lyrics oriented. It was the lyrics that got through. Now, the Bowl gave me that whole thing of the bohemia of the Bowl, the kind of freeness that he sang. And besides, of course, their spiritual, their philosophical thing and all that. So there have been people like this that who kind of
There, you took a hiatus in the middle, around
Yes.
1980. And that was the time the Bangla rock scene was coming up in Calcutta. Did you ever find a place, find a song or an album that you really liked from that era? Any musicians?
When I took after my album release, after Winter Baby released, now there was no place for me to perform in Delhi. The only places that a Western musician could have was the nightclubs. And I was what? I was about, say, 20, 21. And when the offers started coming, I got so corrupted. I mean, I feel embarrassed to say this, but I was so corrupted by the flash, by the money, by the accolades and all that. I just, kind of swam into that and started singing in the nightclubs. And it was after a while when that whole charm of, the flash and the money went, and I said, what the hell am I doing here? So I was in England in 78, trying to make it there. And so when I came back to India, I was asked to perform in Chennai. And so I had these fantastic songs, collected songs, and my wife would come and join on stage. Joe would come and join me on stage and everything. But every night, I used to get booed. You know, they literally threw me out of the stage. But anyway, it was a 15-day contract, so I finished that. And the same year in December, I was asked by another hotel to perform. Now I said, okay, this will be my experiment. So I had these satin shirts made, velvet trousers made, and all that. So I went with a big swagger, went on stage and tossed my microphone, went up to a woman and said, "You look lovely tonight," and some shit like that. Sorry,
Yeah, it's fine. It's completely
but
fine.
and people lapped it up, and the manager just won't let go of me. He's just sort of throwing money. You're like, you're on the roll, man. I mean, bid for you. And I just left and I said, no, that's the end of my professional music. And I go back to what I was doing. But I was just thinking, I got into films and all, where this entire movement of Jibon Mukhi Gan was happening in Kolkata. And I was very interested in the Jibon Mukhi. And I have great regard for Shumon and Anjan Datto and all that.
Mohinder Khoraguli.
Mohinder Khoraguli. Now, the Mohinder Khoraguli, he came to see me in Delhi. And he was awesome. He stuck me as, I don't know what. And we sat and chatted. He just came for Susmit Khali 5 minute এর জন্য দেখা করতে চাই. And we sat for hours over cups and cups of tea and everything. And we talked about his vision. He asked me about my vision. He asked me, why am I singing in English? Why not in Bengali or any other language? And I told him, explained to him. And he said, why urban folk music? How can folk get urban? So there were all these kind of, deep, profound sort of questions and answers that we were involved in. And but not understanding the language well,
It's
you know,
hard.
it became difficult for me to follow it through. So whatever little I could understand, I loved it. I loved the use of the modern images, our telephone ring or broken roads. I love those images. But so that was my thing with Jiban Mukhi Gan.
Um, your social activism. It shows in songs like "They Marched to Ayodhya," and recently we are seeing a lot of songs coming out from Shaheen Bagh with the NRCCA protests, and it's happening all over the country. Even metal musicians are coming in, rappers are coming in with songs against the political status quo. Do you think it's more important now than ever before to come out with these songs?
Uh, if I was to start my career now, the whole idea of me singing this kind of music was to reach out. Now, in my time, my target audience was just the opinion leaders. I was singing to them to get through my lyrics, make it a little more this sort of convincing, possibly, to think in terms of changes. And all those people, as I earlier said, that all these people who were in jobs and all that, they still had a voguish kind of an attitude, which I was trying to ride on. And I mean, it was successful to a great extent, and it did that. But if I was to start now, I think I would sing in Hindi. Yes. And I would start. And I would start in, I mean, I don't know if I would be in Bengali or something like that. Because it's a small kind of thing. I would like to pan out because that has been my perspective, global.
Would the things you sing about still be the same?
Oh yes, definitely it would be. Definitely it would
The
be.
songs you write about, let's say, for example, Train to Calcutta, you said that it's based on things you actually see.
Yes.
Could you tell us the story behind song or Train to Calcutta?
Okay. See, my songs are not fictions, you know. They're songs written by somebody asks me a question, we get into a discussion like friend of a friend, or somebody who would come and say, when I used to sing "This Land Is Your Land," and I used to say from from the Gulf of Cambay to Ganga or something like that. There was a Northeast man who came to me and he said, "How dare you exclude the Northeast?" So I changed it to Brahmaputra. So it's very interactive. So I mean, I would listen to a story, or I would read a headline, and so I would start. And it was not like I never said I'm going to work on a song. You know, yeah, there was a story, there was a peg, and I would write it down and sing about it. So that's the structuring of my music, and even now I see it. So there was, I remember quite recently actually, on a train, I meet somebody from Bihar, and he had stacks of newspaper and all that. And he was, I don't know who he was, but he was so angry with me. And he said, I mean, you call yourself a social change thing and all that. Have you written a song on farmers? So I said, I haven't found a peg. So he gave me a peg. He talked to me about, Monsanto and Dow Chemicals and IMF and World Bank taking over, all that kind of stuff. And then later on, I also, when I heard about the suicides and all, so this song kept changing.
Even right now.
Even right now. So I wrote a song called Sons of the Soil. So that's how my music happens.
Amazing. And lastly, could you talk a bit about the open prisons that you advocate?
Open prison, as the name suggests, is different from a closed prison. So in today in closed prison, the whole idea of prison has changed from punishment to reform. You know, so we set up a trust called PAR, Prison Advocacy and Activist Reforms. And so we have been working with the judiciary and the police department on how to change a system. So initially we didn't know about open prisons at all. So we were working. My the girl who looks after this whole thing was a chief executive officer, Smita Chakraborty, is a brilliant mind, and she worked in Bihar and worked out on. She worked in closed prison. He worked on closed. She worked on closed prison, and she came up with some data which was just sort of not only you know concerning, but it was annoying. That a cell which can have 10 people has 25 people in it.
Wow.
And at night, when they go to sleep, they have the bed cover. Say about 5 or 10 people get together and they stand and they tie themselves up and sleep the night. And then there is given time. So after about an hour, another man comes, "Hey, it's our turn."
It's like a modern day, the Black Hole Monument.
That's right. It's a black hole. Now, when in Rajasthan we went, we discovered this concept of open prison, which is not new, which was sometime in 1950, and which was not, the man was also very low profile who started it. But it was a very successful movement where, after for good behavior and all that, you are granted the open prison from closed. So where the open prison doesn't have any bars, there are no police monitoring you, and it's like a village. You have a home, you stay with your family, so there is a connect, and then you go out in the morning after an attendance, go out, seek work, but you've got to come back.
Kind of like parole.
It's like a parole, but you've got to come back every evening, and go through the attendance.
It's a lot more freeing.
Absolutely free. And there's such a lot of happiness. Of course, I mean, the regret for the punishment is there, And I mean, there are a lot of people. After all, you see, uh, in the prison today, out of 100, there are only 30 who are convicted. 70 are under trials. Now, those under trials, those are all circumstantial murders or whatever it is. I mean, there's a fight on the road between a car and somebody else. The guy, he sees a stone, he picks up the stone and throws it at it hits the temple. He died. Now, so that's just circumstance. They take, yes, you go through the punishment.
And trials in India can extend up to 20, 30, maybe
Absolutely,
more.
absolutely. I mean, there is a
Very backed up.
yeah, there are people, there are some old men who are in their 80s who can't hear, who can't see, but they have no way to go. They have no place to go, so they'd rather not go. Now the jail administration is having a problem as to where do they take them. So we are now working on open prisons, and it's a very satisfying kind of work, because any kind of reform work is always nice, because the response is so terrific. So that's my present work at the moment.
And do you have anything to say to the musicians who are pursuing music as a career now?
The only thing, as Miles Davis said, play what you really are. I mean, don't go in for writing the top hit or something like that. That there are two kinds. One is an artist, one is a musician. An artist is one who goes and expresses himself.
Being true to himself.
Yes, you express yourself, without this whole thing of trying to hit the gallery. And the musician world is one who will work for days and weeks and months to make a song which will be acceptable to
A more commercial.
yeah, yeah. So I hope people are a little more true to music.
Thank you so much for this.
Thank you so very much.